In the early 1980s, the dense, shadowy woods surrounding Washington state's Green River became a sprawling, natural graveyard. Dozens of young women, many of them teenagers, vulnerable and working the streets, simply vanished into this unforgiving landscape. Eventually, searchers would find them. Often, months or even years had passed, leaving investigators with scattered skeletal remains and discarded scraps of clothing hidden in the tall brush. Local law enforcement formed the Green River Task Force to hunt down whoever was responsible. They chased down thousands of tips, interviewed hundreds of suspects, and scoured miles of terrain. But every conventional clue seemed to evaporate into the trees. The geographical scale of the dumping grounds made standard detective work nearly impossible. Police were attempting to track an elusive killer across a forest spanning hundreds of square miles. One of the men the task force interviewed early on was a local named Gary Ridgway. They questioned him in 1987, searched his house, and took a saliva sample, but couldn't find anything definitive to hold him. That changed in 2001. Forensic technology had caught up, and scientists at the Washington State Patrol Crime Lab were finally able to test that old saliva sample. The male DNA profile matched semen and hairs found on 4 of the victims. It seemed like a clear victory, but Ridgway's defense team had an immediate counterargument. They claimed the DNA merely proved Ridgway was a customer of these women, not their killer. And the prosecution had a gap in their case. The biological evidence only linked Ridgway to a tiny fraction of the bodies. As the official court summary shows, 42 of the Green River cases remained uncharged because there was no physical evidence connecting him to them. Prosecutors were staring down a legal nightmare. They had a suspected serial killer in handcuffs, but lacked the scientific proof to convict him for the vast majority of the missing women. To close that gap, the task force pivoted in 2002. They contacted Microtrace, an independent laboratory, to hunt for forensic evidence even smaller than cellular DNA. Investigators looked closely at Ridgway's life. For decades, he worked as a paint detailer at a commercial truck manufacturing plant, operating high-pressure spray guns. A high-pressure spray gun creates a fog of perfectly round paint spheres that settle on clothing. These spheres are incredibly small, around 10 microns in diameter. That's 1/10 the thickness of a human hair, making them invisible to the naked eye. This gave the scientists a highly specific target. If they could find these invisible workplace paint spheres on the victim's clothing, it would scientifically shatter Ridgway's alibi. He couldn't claim he was just a casual customer if his industrial environment was embedded in their clothes. Hunting for an invisible speck of paint required specialized hardware. Microtrace utilized a Perkin-Elmer auto-image microscope attached to an FTIR spectrometer. Using this machine, scientists scanned thousands of microscopic paint specks collected from Ridgway's clothes, his work locker, and his vehicles, building a reference library of his specific chemical world. Next, they turned to the evidence collected from the victims. Under powerful optical microscopes, researchers used razor-sharp tungsten needles to painstakingly isolate individual microscopic particles from their clothing. Because the auto-image system had a high signal-to-noise ratio, the scientists could bounce infrared light off these 10-micron particles to read their exact chemical fingerprint. Crucially, this process didn't destroy the sample, preserving it for court. Researchers found hundreds of these microscopic sears on the clothes of 6 different victims. The chemical fingerprint was a match for Imron, a rare, highly durable paint used extensively at Ridgway's exact workstation at the truck plant. Those microscopic spheres of Imron paint provided the physical link the prosecution needed. It proved the victims had been in close, extended contact with Ridgway's specific, private environment. Confronted with microscopic proof he couldn't even see, let alone clean up, Ridgway realized his alibi was destroyed. He abandoned his defense. In 2003, Ridgway officially confessed to 48 murders, and part of his plea agreement involved leading investigators to the remains of 4 victims that would have otherwise never been recovered. This invisible evidence forced a confession that decades of interviews and physical search warrants never could. Today, the public largely remembers the Green River case as a triumph of DNA profiling. But the forensic reality is that the ultimate justice, the plea deal that closed dozens of unsolved murders, was secured by a 10-micron speck of paint. And there is a haunting footnote to this scientific victory. The lead trace evidence expert on the case, Skip Palahniuk, noted that he was almost asked to examine the victim's clothing back in 1985. If that microscopic analysis had been authorized and funded at the time, the chemical fingerprint of Ridgway's workplace would have been identified almost 2 decades earlier, potentially stopping the killer in his tracks. For 20 years, investigators searched a massive geographical landscape for answers. But the absolute truth was hiding the entire time, suspended in a world invisible to the naked eye.